Hey, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Really Charlie podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Perry, and today's guest is Michael Semiao from all parts of Massachusetts, but we're going to give him his own town of Acushnet, Massachusetts. And he also played for Fairhaven High School and Holy Family High School, along with his collegiate days. And actually, back then, was it called AAU? You did a bunch, before
It wasn't.
college.
No, it
No,
wasn't.
I
I was pre that. So I'm a little bit before Mike Herron. I'm a little bit before Chris Herron, where everybody's riding around in cars and in vans.
yes, yes,
So it was
exactly.
interesting because as my group got older, and you didn't have to rely on one car. Everybody had a car, but you had to be careful because we were traveling, pretty good distances to get around. But yeah,
Hmm.
it wasn't called anything. It
All
was,
right.
and it was, yeah, it was just one of those things where I didn't even know it existed, until I got exposed to it with the buddies. And that goes back to, when I'm in eighth grade and
Hmm.
um, I got in. So my father ends up somehow getting Jim Tavares involved, and Jim comes to scout me a couple of times. That tournament that I mentioned in a couple of podcasts ago, where I met Marlon Burns, Jim came to scout me because he didn't know anybody from Acushnet. So just like what Jimmy Colbert said, who comes out of Acushnet? Well, there were a
Yeah.
couple of kids, right? So
Hmm.
so there was Mike Verino that came out. There was Joey Gaudreau that came out. All of those guys went to Holy Family, and so Jim comes to scout me, and I end up going to a tournament in Waltham, Massachusetts, at the Waltham Boys Club, which was a pretty famous tournament at the time. And I'm sitting on the bench. I'm not going to get any playing time, but I'm just getting exposed to all of what's taking place. And it was blowing me away, the competition and what was going on, and that I had no idea that this even was happening. And so it was interesting because the team that I'm on, the New Bedford Buddies, we go to the finals and we ended up losing in a really close game. But this sort of follows. I'm going to go back a second. When you had the podcast with Mickey Gonzalez, and he had mentioned when he was a junior or senior in high school, and he was going through tryouts for the Boston Shootout team. And he's going through tryouts, and who's there? Ronnie Perry's there. Dwan Chandler was there. Joe Bullia was there.
Yep.
So after that buddies game, I go into the locker room, and the gym is a small gym. The locker room is even smaller, and I know there's a senior game coming on afterwards. So I'm hustling up to get changed. Charlie, do you know who's in the locker room with me changing?
Who's
All
that?
these high school All Americans. I was stunned. So I come running out of the locker room and tell my father, I said, "You're never going to guess who's playing." He goes, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Yeah, but they were 3 feet from me."
Hmm.
And so, I had, I knew of Ronnie Perry just because of word of mouth, and I had watched him on Channel 2, way back in the day when they would broadcast the Catholic tournament. And I would watch it. And I knew his name, I knew who he was. So my dad and I spent watching them play. So it was, as I said, it was Ronnie Perry, Juan Chandler, Joe Bullia, Craig Watts. All these guys go on to play in college. Ronnie Perry's an All American. So it was that when Mickey mentioned that, it kind of brought back to me just my first exposure to these guys in real life, because
Yeah.
I had read about them. I had not really been around them much. Um, so those buddies tournaments. So the next year, after my season with Holy Family, is when I start to play.
Yep.
And my first exposure with that team and those players, again, going back to the podcast with Jimmy Colbert, when he mentioned somebody from Moore Rochester, the other guard that started with me was Jimmy Lanigan. And, as I mentioned in that podcast, Jimmy was a really good athlete and he was a really good leader. And so we're playing our first round game is against the Talisman, which was another, historical team out of Boston. And they've got Jimmy Sullivan from Dom Savio, who a year later would be the player of the year in Massachusetts. Tommy Sullivan, who's playing at Don Bosco at the time, and Timmy O'Shea, who was at
Yep.
Don Bosco at the time also. So they're loaded. And so, within the first 2 minutes of the game, Jimmy Lanigan steals the ball from Timmy O'Shea. And that really perked me up because I'm like, okay, he's not afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. And we beat them that night. We beat
Good.
them that night. I played really, really well. I shot the lights out for me, which was I was just they couldn't find me. We had Mike Borden on our team who was from Somerset, who was a really good player, and they had really focused on them, and I could just kind of drift all night and get open shots, and I was making them from everywhere. um,
Good.
so the next so the next round we played the Waltham Hawks, which was another tough team, loaded with players. But we go to the finals and we play Lee School, and they had Carl Hobbs on their team. And I mentioned Carl when David later was on with Jimmy, and that was another close game. College scouts everywhere, Charlie, in the stands for that game. This was a Saturday afternoon, and we ended up winning. I ended up drawing an offensive foul on one of their players right at the end of the game with 2 seconds left. We were up one. Kid drives to the basket. I stepped in, took the charge, and I'm laying on the ground. And Jimmy Landing comes over and picks me up and walks me to under the basket to where there'd be some pads to protect us. And he's holding me. And the reason
Hmm.
why he's holding me, I look over the shoulder, and the kid that I took the charge on is rolling around on the floor with the referee who made the call. So
Yep.
everybody's coming out of the stands to break up this fight, and it was just craziness. I had never been exposed to that kind of thing, but that was the level of competition, and my team's performance and my performance in that tournament leads me to get an invite to try out for the National Youth Games team that I mentioned when David Lato was on in the same place where Mickey was going through the tryouts, I
Yep.
think the first round of tryouts for the shootout in Roxbury, at the Roxbury Boys Club, and this is more of a culture story than it is a basketball story at this point. My dad and I come up a week later to try out at 9 o'clock in the morning during the spring of '76, I think. Yeah, and Charlie, get out! I've never been to that part of Boston.
Hmm.
And we get out of the car, and I'm looking at overhead train tracks 20 feet from homes.
Yep.
And I can't believe I'm seeing this. And my father walked right up to me and said, "You don't know how lucky you are."
Hmm.
And that stuck with me to today, obviously, because that was a pretty moving thing to see. I had been to the old garden, I had seen the train tracks down on Causeway Street, going by businesses and going by homes. I had never seen that. Um,
Yeah.
and that was where I was going every week during the tryouts. It was we ended up going to Connecticut in July, so there were tryouts every week, and I was making it through every single round. And the competition was getting better and better and better each week to see how everybody would respond. And it was a great experience getting exposed to those guys and playing with those guys, and they just were my competition all the way through high school. And I still have some relationships with those guys today. And it was just quite eye opening going through that and trying to express to my friends at Holy Family, that I'm telling them I'm going for tryouts, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" Because I didn't know about the National Youth Games, which was some quasi small Olympic format,
Sort of
where
like
there were
the
different events.
sort of like the Bay State games of today.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
so we're hanging out together, and I'm sort of the outlier to coming from a real small suburb. Most of these kids were Dorchester, Roxbury. A couple of other kids were from outside of Boston, but we were a pretty tight group. We didn't go anywhere without each other for that entire week, and we won the championship. We won the gold medal in a triple overtime game against a team from Virginia. Um, so it was, again, I just had, yeah, that's those guys. Not a great picture though. A lot of heads being caught off in that picture, but yeah, that's
oh,
us. Um,
that's nice.
so if you look at those green jackets, so that was so you can imagine it's July, it's in Connecticut, it's pretty hot. Those jackets and the pants were the warm-up suits that we wore. They were, Charlie, they were wool. they were they were pretty uncomfortable, but we all took great pride in just kind of the achievement, and all of us kind of moving forward. In this group, most of this group that's here, a few years later, the class of '79, which was class of '80. But the
Yeah.
juniors that were identified, most of them are here. Most of them are guys that I knew and played with. Um,
That's
so
awesome.
it was just a great group to be around. And like I made reference with David, when I would see Carl, when I would see those guys around, it was like we hadn't missed a beat. Because
Hmm.
we put a lot of time in, and we were young kids. We were freshmen, and some of us were sophomores, were young sophomores. But it was really great to be part of that. And again, it was just something I didn't know. I didn't know existed. I didn't know really happened. And I remember my father saying, we're going to go for a tryout. I was like, oh, okay. And we go, and I walk into the gym, and there's 500 kids.
Yeah.
And so you played all morning. You were given a number, and there were four of the guys you were going to play with, and you played till 7, and you sort of that rotation where you'd stay on if you won, but you didn't stay on more than 2 games in a row, and you'd come off. My team didn't lose. We played all
Good.
morning, we just didn't lose, and it was just getting to know guys. As I mentioned, coming out of Holy Family, I was getting to be a really good team player, and I could handle the ball pretty well at that point, and I could do some things, and the coaches noticed. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just played solid and made open shots, made the right pass. So yeah, it was week to week, so I didn't know, and I think it was after week 4 or 5 I knew I was getting there. Yeah, this was a picture outside my house that the Standard Times came to take a picture of. So they didn't use this picture, but
Which
that's the uniform. That was the white uniforms. We had white and green um, to wear. But
still got that medal?
I do. I have it in a
You get it.
case. I'll send you a picture of that. I have it somewhere.
Good.
I have it in a
Awesome.
case. It's been in a case since the time I got it, so I still have that. Yes.
It's it's amazing how some of the stuff like that, they're gone by the wayside. There's so many people that get rid of those artifacts, those trophies and all that stuff, and it's crazy. See, good evening from Coach Brenna Bulgar. Ashley Green says hello. She is at work from the Triple Threat Basketball, New Bedford. Yeah, doing great things there, Mike. They were just on recently, which you were
Yeah,
yeah,
I
you
was. Yeah.
see, yeah. Um, so now, as you go through that tryout, and you meet some people, you meet some friends that you know different part of life, as far as poor kids going through things. But the one thing that I like is that I don't care where you're from, man. Everyone, that love of basketball can bring people together so easily sometimes, and that's why I always try to encourage kids to go and play sports and do it, because you it's always been good to me. But there's one thing about basketball: you can play that no matter what. If you were by yourself, if you had the ball, you just go find a hoop, you play. And with me, that's all I needed for the day, and I'm pretty sure that was the thing with you, Um, but
Yeah, it sort of created this kind of refuge, for me.
hmm
I spent hours in my driveway just with the drills that I had and just shooting. And that just was something that, I knew that was interest of me, and I had really high motivation at that time because I was seeing things that were happening for me personally that were really positive. But yeah, it was a refuge. I absolutely agree with that. That ball in that basket, it was just easy, and it was something that I look forward to do every day. And that was um, much different than where my friends were as far as sort of attention span and interest and motivation, which was
yeah,
fine. And,
yeah,
I would have kids from the neighborhood all of a sudden show up in my driveway just to watch.
hmm
And there was a family up the street whose father played for Mr. Wilson back in the '60s at Fairhaven, and so his child had some learning disabilities, and he would show up in my yard and just watch. And I
yeah,
finally got him to actually hold the basketball for a little while. I taught him how to dribble a little bit. I could pick him up and try to help him get in the basket, but he would come by, then all of a sudden just like disappear. He'd just leave. but he'd show up as soon as he heard my ball bouncing in my driveway, he would show up.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
my friends would come by for a little while and sit on the grass and watch me, and just kind of would be talking while and I wouldn't stop. I would just continue doing what I was doing, and that, my friends just knew that's what I was doing and that's what I was interested in, and so that was kind of funny watching that. But the upside to this, my parents always knew where I was. As long as I
Yeah.
heard the ball dribbling in the driveway, they knew where I was. And one of the funny stories with this is, I had a number of times when I was playing late at night where the Acushnet cops would show up because some neighbor complained about
Hmm.
all the noise. And it
Yeah.
wasn't music, it wasn't friends, it wasn't a party. It was me in my driveway until 9, 10 o'clock at night during the summer, just practicing. And
Yeah.
I knew who the neighbor was, and it got to be kind of comical that it was taking place. And I knew I knew some of the policemen just from my time when I would go over to Polk Park and play. I was playing with the chief of police son,
Hmm.
who had played for Mr. Wilson at one point. So I knew all those guys, and it was no big deal. But it was just funny that the police showed up. And they kind of walk up the driveway, and my dad got to know them a little bit, and they'd hang around and and say, okay, you should probably start shutting this down around 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, okay, fine, and I do that. But it was pretty funny.
Yeah. It's you know, I remember a few cases where kind of same scenario, and people calling on us playing basketball. It was just amazing. What do you rather us be on the corner acting up, or we're here playing
Yep.
basketball? And but anyways, the let's see. Now the years you were in Fairhaven, um, the tryout numbers, how big were they compared to now? For some reason, I think that the numbers are far higher back then. It was the thing to do, sports, and but as far as the numbers, and the population of the school, were the numbers, at that 30 range, or was it far higher?
I think it was far higher,
Yeah.
because it was interesting when I when we had Ronnie on and Derek Andrews. I had a conversation with them a night before, and Ronnie asked me a pretty tough question. He asked me, he said, when you came to Fairhaven, did you catch any flack from any of the players because now you're going to be taking some minutes from them?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I didn't. But in retrospect, when I think about it, the group that were seniors, the class of '78 that goes to the state finals, those guys didn't have to worry about me. But it was really, if I thought, and I did think about this, it was the group that was coming up next,
Yeah.
because they had Mr. Wilson's rule was if you were a senior, you weren't playing junior varsity, so you weren't going to make the team. And I know other schools had that same rule. Um, so it was really the other group that I was probably taking some minutes from, that they weren't. And I looked at it at the time was, well, if you're not ready, that's not my fault.
Yeah.
I'm ready. So I'm here, I'm trying out, I'm going to try to get minutes and I'm going to try to help. But if the next group coming up wasn't ready, then I can't worry about that. But
Yeah.
what ended up happening was the following season, when I become a junior, those guys that came up only had 1 year of varsity experience, and that was that year. So when that class that graduated in '79, that's when they got really true varsity experience, and they weren't ready, because it is a big jump when you go from playing junior varsity and sitting some varsity minutes. When you start to play, that's a whole different thing, and they
Yeah.
weren't ready. And there's nothing against them, and nothing really personally to do with them. It's just the way the school was built. And as I mentioned in that podcast, that group that came forward, they came forward sort of in pieces because they weren't ready yet. And the first guy that came through was Jimmy Hennessy when he was a sophomore.
Hmm.
Another group comes through when they're juniors, and all of them come up when they're seniors. So, when I joined that team, I'm coming off the bench. I'm the sixth or seventh man on that team because they're pretty much set in their roles, and they knew who they are, they knew what they could do. But the group that was sitting there that were good JV players couldn't break through because
Yeah.
they just weren't ready. And so the next year, we had a pretty good season, but our captain got hurt, And as soon as that happened, all of a sudden our bench gets real short. Guys who are coming off the bench have to start, and they're not ready for varsity basketball, and that hurt us. And
Well,
yeah, so this is the group from '78. So this is the group that goes to the state finals, and was just it was a really fun season in retrospect when you look at all of what took place. Um,
who's number 30?
so that's Chucky Tillett.
Man, he looks so
So
familiar.
Chucky, you know, in my opinion, the best athlete in our school. Um, he gets a scholarship to Boston College to play football. Um, was really a good baseball player. Really good in track. Just a really good athlete.
That's good. The Now, as you're going through all this, um, let's see. Now, I understand with Coach Nabriga and that situation, which pretty much led you to going to Fairhaven High School, if I'm correct, right?
Yes.
Of Yeah, all right. So, um,
Which
and
Charlie, that was not an easy decision to make.
no, it there's no way. I mean, you know, it's that's very difficult. So I get it, and but I'm glad you chose the path you did because you kind of look at all the different things that was given to you through Fairhaven High School, New Bedford buddies, and so on and so forth. So it pans out, it works out. The year there at Holy Family is what's beneficial, and you know, but I love the way life carries itself. You make decisions or family decisions to go wherever you're going. And if you didn't go that way, things would be different in your family, some shape or form, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what, even with the game of basketball. So,
Sure.
I'm glad it took that course, and the result is what you have today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, the I want to talk about, let me see, and this may be off the subject matter that we have on the bottom line, folks, but it was real interesting that Michael put a post on Facebook about the football field at Fairhaven High School, the controversy behind that, and
Mm-hmm.
I just to me personally, I like to see that a school is showing something, some interest, providing some financial, um, financial, not stability, but they're committing finances to sports. And that's always something that I always like to see because the first thing they want to do is eliminate sports at some level, some shape and form. So I'm kind of glad that they dedicated to do that, for the team, for the school, for the community. And the one thing it's turf and they're worried about injuries and all that. That's the stuff that I always hear. But it's always when I look at that field and I look at some others and I say, "Wow, that's the dream I had about Buttonwood Park in New Bedford," and I wanted to kind of utilize that, especially where the New Bedford Bears play. I wanted to put that type field right there. So when I see things like that that's going on in Fairhaven, I like it personally. I don't know how you feel about it, but I just want to give it a 5 star, and I may be on the other side of the fence, as far as some people may be opposed to it, but I'm not.
It's funny because one of the things that occurs when I come out of a Acushnet and not great facilities back then. Holy Family, not great facilities. And for Haven, whereas you heard from Derek Andrews, we're playing our varsity games at the junior high because we don't
Hmm.
have the facilities. And I always understood sort of the sacrifice you make, and when you're going up against bigger schools. Meanwhile, New Bedford High School has built that huge field house. We experienced as players what Durfee did with a new field house. I played. I When I was a junior, we played their first game. when they opened up that gym, and I was, great. This is fantastic.
Hmm.
So I'm all for give the kids the opportunity, give them the right facilities, let them use that. I was very excited one when they inducted Mr. Wilson. Oh, not inducted, but they named the new basketball court under his name, and I
Hmm.
hadn't seen the facility. And so when I went to that ceremony, I was just really, really happy. I was walking around with some of the guys that I played with, like, geez, why? How come we didn't have that here?
Yeah.
Because there is something about having a gym on the property of your school, right? There is
Yeah.
something about that where you can walk through that, you can go to that. You don't have to worry about getting into a car to go someplace to practice and play your game. It's right there, and this I think there is something really to that.
It's very,
And the
very
facility
comfortable.
agreement has. Hmm?
It's a very comfortable gym. I love going there.
Yeah, so it's nice, and so I wish that had occurred, that we had those kind of facilities, because I understood the sacrifice and what you're trying to do in beating these bigger schools and what you have to do and overcome, and that's all fine, and that has a level of you know it has a level of theater to a certain extent, but that's
Yeah.
okay. That's not great, but I give every kid the advantage that they should have, right? So it shouldn't be a sacrifice that you have to play with some facilities up against the bigger schools who have all the advantages, right? So
Yeah.
let's try to even the playing field, give them the opportunity, and if there's money there to do all that, great. I'm all for that. So yeah, it's Fairhaven's come a long way, right? With
Sure
the
has.
new buildings they have, the new gym, the new field. I think it's fantastic.
That's good. That's good. Real good. The um wanted to talk to you about the NBA and the vaccination. How you feel about that? I think all in all, I think that the NBA and the players union are doing the right thing because I lost a lot of friends this year and last year, and it's it's sad, but I hope they stick with it. There's a few guys, maybe a dozen and a half that are kind of that are just they just don't want to do it, and I can understand that. I got all kinds of feedback from people, friends, family that feel the same way. But when it comes to thousands of people that you're running into on a daily basis, hundreds of people, I think we have to be safe. And they may feel that it's not safe. People are still getting COVID through the, even though they have the vaccination. But to me, it's something you got to, you should do. It's my opinion. But people just don't want to be forced to do it. And I think when it comes to the NBA and people that are sitting there, you know, me, family, friends, whoever, we need to make sure that we're safe when we're going in those arenas. People are cooking your food. You're sitting on places that, you didn't clean it, but, someone else did. You kind of want to sanitize everything, but um, I just, we're going to miss some good players playing this year. And they kind of, I like to see the best of the best on the court. And it looks like we're going to have some stars sitting out for quite a few games, at least 40. Um, so how do you feel about that?
I hope I think the leadership through the players union has been pretty strong and pretty consistent on this, and I hope the players that have some questions, who are hesitant over all of this, hopefully they get the right information in front of them, and they can start to make, I hope, a qualified decision. Because I read some of what you're talking about, and it was sort of all over the place about the reasons why breakthrough cases are occurring, and that seems to be a default over, well, that's why I'm not going to get vaccinated, because why would I bother, because people are still getting sick, and that's true, but the odds get reduced, the infection that occurs is less,
Hmm.
and so it has a layer to it that just seems like it's not the right information getting to these players, getting to the organizations enough where they're following through with it and presenting whomever it needs to be in front of these organizations and players where they can kind of vet through all of these issues and let them hear the answers from the experts, whomever that may be, and let them hopefully give them the right information or enough information to make a qualified decision. Because based on what I read, I didn't think that that was the case.
Yeah.
It just seemed to be it just seemed to be sort of like a scatter map as far as the response, and that was disappointing to see, because I do think that the product with the people and the players that have this discussion will really hurt the NBA.
Yeah.
And it's not. But what's also challenging is you have these issues that are not consistent throughout these different states, and that gets to be challenging too. And so the NBA has to kind of figure their way through that, along with, I think, every other professional league and college, major colleges and Division I, Division II schools have to kind of find their way through this, and that gets to be challenging because it's just not a consistent platform. It's state by state, in some situations county by county, and that gets to be hard. It gets to be hard for you and I trying to find your way in a daily life, never mind trying to play a sport at a high level.
True. The growing up, we didn't have those. We didn't have that problem. There was nothing close to what COVID and the pandemic is. We didn't have anything close to that. Pretty much didn't worry about anything. Um, other than just getting sick. The
And even
so
that proximity when you're on a team, if
yeah,
someone got sick, the likelihood that more than one kid is going to get sick was pretty high. And
I,
you and I, if you've been on different teams, you experience that, and that's always kind of tricky trying to get your way through that. If it's not on a team or if it's in a classroom, you try to do the best you can, but inevitably, if one kid on a team got sick, there's going to be multiple kids getting sick. Not nearly the
yeah,
drama that exists and the issues that are around COVID at this point. But yeah, I've been on a number of teams. So have you, where kids get sick, you get sick,
yeah,
and you kind of have to kind of get yourselves through that. But that was just inherent to, because you're always in close proximity to each other.
exactly. The I mean, look how heated they were with Rudy Gobert. Mitchell was real heated. Almost got to the point. I mean, we don't know if they fist fighted in the gym or anything, but it was kind of crazy. So this may lead to some of those situations where teammates are going at it. And I hope not. Hopefully we have a 100% vaccination and we can move forward. And like you said people may get sick after receiving the vaccination, but you know what? It's chances are that it's going to be a little bit easier than not having it. So the let's go back to after. I want to go back to New Bedford Buddies. All right.
Mm-hmm.
It maintained itself for quite a few years, and and after Mr. Tavaz, he had to stop the program. And did anyone from your team or other teams think about starting it up for any reason? Trying to get something similar to it in the area. I mean, I know there's AAU, but just the name tradition, kind of. I want to
Oh,
carry
well,
it
again,
on.
I think, yeah, I'm sort of a little bit displaced from that because you sort of move on when you move on.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not aware of that. But I think part of what what I experienced and what I learned, as soon as money came into this, right? As soon as those sponsors came in, and that's when the AAU starts to get developed. Um, it gets to be pretty tricky how you maneuver through that, because now you're talking about major corporations jumping in with this because they're trying to get these kids to go to certain schools that they have that they're sponsoring, and that gets to be hard. And so the local situations with gyms sort of gets pushed aside because there are people there that already have some legacy relationships, and that gets to be really hard to do. And what you're going to try to figure that out. It was much simpler when we were driving around in cars,
Hmm.
and Jim has 4 basketballs and tank tops that he's given out, and you're going to pay $3 or something to go play in the rec gym for the Sunday morning. It was much simpler. Even though I would have jumped in if things kind of move yourself forward in time I would have loved playing AAU.
Yeah.
I would have loved that level of competition and getting exposed to those players in those situations, because I wouldn't know anything, right? I wouldn't have any reference point to what really took place, when I was part of it. But both Herons would know how the evolution really started to change when they were there, especially Chris, I think,
Yeah.
because that's when it really starts to change. And um, so it was difficult to try to move that forward if you didn't have the sponsorship, because it just sort of wedged everybody out of the way. So anything that was local, and it was another local team through New Bedford that, I think, was it Ronnie Lomba that ended up pulling a team together for a little while.
Mm.
But that got to be hard for him because that required a level of commitment to kind of move people around and go to these tournaments, which was hard to organize.
Yeah.
So Jim was the only guy in the area that was really doing anything. I knew the guys from the Roxbury Titans. I knew Al Brodsky. I knew some of the kids from Lee School. I knew Jack McMahon, who just passed away in the last month or so, from the Talisman. And those
Wow.
guys had been involved with it for years. This is going back to when before I'm not even playing basketball, when I'm in grade school, that these men are involved with that. And that's where Jim comes from. That was what Jim was, sort of his origins of pulling all that together. Um, so, those guys in up in Boston somehow become immune to the AAU to a certain extent, where those tournaments through the city leagues and the BNBL sort of
Hmm.
still happen.
Yeah.
So which is pretty interesting that they've been able to pull it together, but locally through the New Bedford area, that just didn't happen.
Yeah. It's a huge tradition up there, and it's something that you want to do. It's growing up, you want to put a certain uniform on, you want to be a part of a certain organization, a team, and and that's the piece. That's the team that everyone wants to be a part of. Um, so you mentioned earlier about Mickey and the Boston shootout. Um, did that ever come your way? You ever participate? You ever try out?
What's funny? It's funny you say that, because I ended up currently I have an online relationship with a guy through Instagram, who, just like you, Charlie, somehow I missed him
Yeah.
when I was playing up in Boston. I missed him when I was at Bryant. He was at Providence College at the time, and he asked me the same question a couple of months ago, and I had to go back to my dad because I don't know how I missed it. I do know that really the end of my senior year at Fairhaven, I was pretty tapped out. I
Yeah.
didn't play a lot. I had planned and committed to playing some tournaments with Tavares, and I was really, really struggling, just with motivation, because I had played a lot. The senior year, I taken a lot out of me, and that shootout was that spring. The tryouts. So all those guys that were part of that youth games team, that picture you showed, all end up
Hmm.
on the shootout team. I
Wow.
never I never looked for an invite. I don't remember. My father doesn't remember, but I do know that I was done. And what I was doing at the end of my senior year, I was playing for the tennis team at Fairhaven, and that's sort of where my interest was. I just was not. I really, really, I don't know why, but it seemed like a switch went off in my head. Like, okay, you've done enough, done for a little while, and that
Yep.
was sort of my behavior. The end of my senior year through that summer, where I was playing tennis a lot. I was running around with a tennis pro, just playing in different areas and playing different tournaments. And so, that kind of goes back to really where my athletic beginnings is really playing tennis. And
Wow.
I sort of walked away from that when I was young, because I wasn't ready for the responsibility of being, a somewhat an individual. I was more
Yeah.
interested in getting involved with my friends and playing on a team sport. But my dad and I still played from time to time, and that was something I did, off season. But that was really my second love, was tennis. And I had a pretty good summer. I won a tennis tournament in New Bedford that summer. Had a couple of good runs in some other tournaments. But yeah, I never. Yeah, it was weird. I never got the invite. I never got the attention that I should. I didn't pay attention to it, and I should have. And my dad doesn't remember either. But I do. I'm repeating myself here, but I do know I was pretty much done after my senior year. Sort of our last game, and it was, like I said, it was like a switch went off. And I remember going to play in a tournament with Tavares, the Waltham tournament. And Charlie, I had nothing. I just wasn't there. And I apologized to Jim. And
Yeah.
I ended up playing another tournament with him. I ended up playing in a senior tournament up in Taunton with him, and I ended up playing in the Open division at the same time. So now I'm committing myself to playing to two teams, and I lose in the finals with Jim in the tournament, but in the Open division we ended up winning the championship. So that was with some guys that I ended up scrimmaging with later on during the summer a little bit that played at Providence. Bruce Campbell, Billy Eason, some of the guys that were alumni from Bryant that I ended up playing with, which was basically just a pickup game in a grammar school gym over the summer. And that was really the only basketball that I was playing. I was, just kind of just tapped out at the time.
Yeah. The the it that happens, even with me with football. I thought after high school I would, at least try to get on some team, whether it was walk on or whatever, and I just didn't want to go to school anymore, and just want to establish a career somewhere. And it was either the U.S. Army or one of the services, and almost went to the Army, and then the PD called me, and that's what stopped me from going to college until later on, and then I
Mm-hmm.
did it for a career wise. But the trying to think of here, what I lost track of what I was gonna say, Mike. Oh man. Um, but the it will come to me. I think that all in all, we got to just encourage kids to continue to do the sports thing. But the social media and just kind of gaming and doing that's where the interest is. When I went to the camp, a couple of basketball camps this year, and I still thought the numbers were low, and it's kind of sad, and I hope, I hope, and I know we won't lose, but in the area the numbers are getting low. They come and go, fluctuate, but I hope the basketball, football, baseball interest stays in this area, um, because it was a great tradition. It was a great tradition for me and you and many, many others. So I hope that we can continue to play for the name in front of our jerseys, which, Mike had said on during his podcast, play for Fairhaven High School, play for New Bedford High School, play for New Bedford Volk, play for Dartmouth High School, and just continue to keep that tradition, man. Um,
Well, it's
I'm,
funny that when I had gone to Mr. Wilson's court dedication, and there was a layer of players who were older that were there. My peer group, there wasn't that many of us there that day. And one of the things I talked about with my wife about when we were coming home that afternoon, I said, what ends up happening is those older players they grew up in that town, they went to school, they married, stayed in that town, got jobs, raised families there. I said, my generation and probably a couple of generations afterwards started to move.
mm-hmm,
They went different parts of the country and didn't come back home.
yeah.
And so I said that was, it was pretty eye opening to see that. And I was just having a conversation online with someone the other night about, certain names within different towns are prominent, right? So in Fairhaven, there were certain names, and this as well as I do through New Bedford. There were certain names that show up during sports, and that's that theme that existed with those families that stayed, that
Mm-hmm,
they married, they work in those towns, they raise families there, and their children all play through the high schools, through Fairhaven. I recognize names when I look at the newspapers and I see what's going on online. I know somebody in that family. I know their aunt, and I know somebody that's
mm-hmm,
there. And that exists everywhere. And I think, yeah, that's the thread you start to lose, where those kids that move away don't come back and they establish roots someplace else. And that's, I think, you start to lose some of that thread that you mentioned about playing for your town, playing for your high school, which was a big deal.
yeah.
To have that school on the front of your jersey, that's a big deal. And
So
when I mentioned on the podcast with Ronnie and Derek about the families that I get exposed to that are there that had been there for a long time. And my wife's family had been there a long time. And I'm sort of the guy that comes in from another town to play there, and I get wrapped up in the history, just like I got wrapped up in the history at Holy Family. It was the same thing. And the names that are the same, the history felt the same. And it's a big deal because the towns made it a big deal. Those people showed up every time you played someplace, which was a great commitment on their part, and they were committed and they had interest. And those people sought you out at different things that you'd showed up. If I showed up at a school play, all of a sudden I've got some parents in front of me or some fathers talking about their son coming up and playing. And so that level of interest is there. And as soon as you have some success, so like when we go to the tournament in 78, I remember sitting in the practicing in the gym after we won our first round game. And Charlie, we're the only team left
Hmm.
because New Bedford High got beat in the first round. They had some really tough luck because, as I mentioned, that was the year during the blizzard, and some of those guys got hurt trying to help their families dig out of their homes.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
got hurt. They hurt ankles. They hurt knees. So we were the only team left, and we got a lot of publication. We got a lot of notice locally, which was fun. It was a lot of fun going through all of that. But and I asked Scott Ashworth about the following that existed when he went to the tournament because they went to the finals when he was there. That town, and you mentioned the Super Bowls, that town really perked up. And
Yeah.
it was just, it sort of kind of sweeps you away about what's going on. And, you've got what, 6,000 people in the gym and 3,000 of them are from Fairhaven.
Hmm.
Wow. Like, you're kidding
Yeah.
me. And it
Yeah.
was not a game, Charlie, that I played at Holy Family or I played at Fairhaven that it's a packed gym. It's a full gym.
Yeah. And
And, we had a tough season at Holy Family. We had great teams and good teams at Fairhaven, not an empty seat.
hmm That's great. I know. I mean, I remember the days of New Bedford High School being packed on both sides of the gym, and that was tremendous. Um,
That was a scary place though, because it was funny because they were sort of displaced because they're a few feet away from the court. But yeah,
yeah.
when you sort of all of a sudden the noise would start,
Hmm.
it sort of echoed through there a little bit, which was a little odd because that was the only gym that was built like that I played
Yeah.
in. It was a little bit strange because you were used to people sitting close to the court,
Yeah.
not in that gym because that gym was
Uh,
just so big.
yeah. They knew what they were doing because the population that was going in there, it wasn't how the actual main gym looked. It was we need more hoops, more basketball, more volleyball nets because we're going to have thousands of kids. 5,000, 4,000 kids in there throughout the day. And so I understand that you had those slide away bleachers. And
Hmm.
away from those bleachers was actually a basketball court. So they really
Hmm.
needed it, and it kind of explains why they hidden away, which uh, I like the closed gyms. I like the gyms where the people are right there. I love that. It's just a good feeling.
The
Mike,
toughest gym to play in was actually at Voc Tech
yeah,
because it was one
exactly.
side and there was nothing on the other side. So,
Yeah.
just trying to have a good shooting background to try to find the rim was really difficult in those big gyms
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
and the acoustics in there were weird. So yeah, it was those things where you get used to it the number of times you play there, but the first time through there, you're like, wow, this is really difficult because I'm not used to this.
Yeah. I actually like the seats um, behind the backboards in any gym. When I get to a gym like that, I'm in awe. Regardless of the age of the gym, when the seats are behind that backboard, and it just a good feeling. Um, Mike, are you comfortable talking about your book? You want to talk about that? And
Yeah,
we got about
yeah,
10 minutes. So
sure.
I just want to make sure that it's okay by you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's fine. So per your encouragement and some others, I have proceeded. I had breakfast with my dad today, and that was 90% of our conversation today.
good.
And challenges that exist through this are quite interesting. So I've had to get up to speed on liabilities and
Hmm.
image and likeness and those kinds of things.
Yep.
Um, kind of building a foundation to the story of all of this. So I've committed myself to certain number of certain time, certain pages. Um, how do I go about getting, so I've reached out, I had gone through the series of, okay, do I find a ghostwriter? How
Hmm.
do I find it? How do I do all this stuff? So I'm doing a lot of it on my own. Right now, it's all of my own. So I think, what did I say? I'm 20 something
Yeah.
pages in, over,
Hmm.
10,000 words in. I've got to start spending more time doing this because I found trying to build foundations to some of this to be really really tough to think about because when I've tried to go back to the podcast that we've done, Charlie, and I've looked at it, it's okay, those are really condensed conversations. I need to expand those conversations on in
Hmm.
words,
Yep.
get it down into some format. So that's been a bit challenging because I've never done this before.
Hmm.
um, so it's now October 1st. I need to finish this and somehow find an editor. I want to get this done before the first of the year.
Awesome. It
So
it's a great feeling, and trial and error is good too. I just want to let you know, trial and error is always good because um, it's just it's going to be a better story throughout the book as you go through the trial and error. Like I was going through, I made a mistake, and boom, as the book was going on, I would continue to get much better at it, and it so. And who knows? I thought I was only going to do one book. Guess what? It's at 15 now. So, I know your intellect, you need to continue to do what you're doing as far as this book and maybe future other books because, that history that you have is, needs to be shared. And actually, you know what? People coming up in your family, later on need to read some of your stories and can pass it on because
it's
if
funny because my father asked me today. So he said, "Is this a book about you? Is this a book about your basketball stories? Is this about the people around your stories?" I said, "It's all of it." I
yeah.
said, "It's all of it." And I said, I haven't, um, as I look to expand some of our conversations, Charlie, on in just getting it to document in some sort of level of documentation, has brought up a lot of different feelings about and trying to remember. One of the things I'm having a challenge with is, okay, trying to remember what I was thinking and what I was like at a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old, as
Hmm.
opposed to me trying to interpret it today. So that's been a
Yeah.
bit tricky. But there are some things that have come out that and we didn't go over this when Jimmy Colbert was on, but he and I had some pretty honest conversations about that time, and that time was tricky for me, and it
Yeah.
was it was difficult for some of those players. Sort of the same conversation over, am I walking in and taking minutes from people,
Hmm.
and opportunities from people, and not being naive enough because I had gone through some of those kind of challenges when I was in junior high, because I'm coming to the junior high as a seventh grader, and I'm starting as a seventh grader. I'm the leading scorer as a seventh grader, and the freshmen that were there were not having it. It was really, really hard for them to see what was going on. But I had a coach, Ronnie Hall, Mr. Hall, who had been there for a long time. He had the courage enough to put me in and never take me out. And
Good.
as difficult as I had difficult games, I had difficult situations. I was learning on the fly, like it seemed to be for a long time. And so it's those challenges that I have to kind of go back to, and some of those are difficult to remember because those are hard times for a really young kid and a young athlete going through that. And some of the challenges that existed in my family at the time was trying to help me through that
Hmm.
because it was all new to us, and it wasn't just me; it was us.
Yeah.
It was all of us were involved with this and all were committed to this, which got to be really hard sometimes. And this was sort of the conversation I had with my dad today, and he doesn't remember a lot of it. I mean, he just doesn't because it's not his, it's mine. But when
Yeah.
I mentioned certain things to him, he remembers what was important at the time and how difficult it was. And it's just now starting to translate and trying to dust off some of that stuff and start to document it, which has been a little bit challenging for me to go back.
Well, just it is what it is, and if it's forgotten memories or it just doesn't get in the book. But there's so many other things that you can move on to, and don't worry about it. Just move on,
Mhm.
and later on something might come up, and it kind of may help you with those particular situations, but it's just not going to be in the book, and
Right.
don't sweat it, because I guarantee you 2/3 of what you're going to come up with, and maybe you want 100% of everything that you've been thinking about, and you only get 2/3 of it. But 2/3 of it is going to be a magnificent book, and I just want to let you know any percentage that you come up with for this book is definitely going to be a good read. I feel it, I know it, and I can't wait until it's done. I'll be the first one in line.
Thank you for that. I want to
Good.
tell one story before we break, though, because I've been holding this story for a bit, and this
Sure.
goes to our first, I think, one of our first communications. So this is you had Wayne Hamlet on, and you know
Yes.
Wayne.
Yep.
So my relationship with Wayne goes back to I'm in eighth grade. No, it's the summer before I go to Holy Family, and my dad knew him, and he knew what kind of athlete Wayne was. He knew where he was coaching. So one day Wayne shows up in my driveway and decides that he is now a football player playing basketball and really takes it to me physically. So flash forward 2 days after that, I am shooting baskets in the New Bedford High School gym because I'm getting ready to go work out with New Bedford High School football team and lift weights
Yep.
and do agility drills and do sprinting and do long distance running. So I meet Coach Soares, I
Yep.
meet Coach McPherson,
Hmm.
and they all of them teasing me. How come you're not coming to New Bedford? Why are you going to Holy Family? You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be working out with our guys. So I've never lifted weights before. I'm really good at agility drills. I can distance running. I'm already doing that on my own. So we're running around the tennis courts up around that whole block. I'm doing really well there. The sprinting, I'm pretty quick, so I'm good there. But boy, am I really feeling it lifting. Now,
Hmm.
I'm no great specimen going into Holy Family. I'm still a skinny kid,
Yep.
but it was that relationship with Wayne that goes on for years, right? So he ends up moving down the street from my grandmother, who lived on Stone Street, right over near the hospital.
Yeah.
And he lived on the corner of Grape and Stone. So when I would visit my grandmother, which I would do regularly, I would see him now and again. And I saw his family grow with his daughters and his children.
Wow. Hey,
Um,
Mike,
so,
I'm sorry to.
yeah,
I mean, my wife probably knows your grandmother. That's where she had her mom and dad and her. They had a house on Stone Street.
really. So she was
Yeah.
26 Stone Street. So that was Lillian Senna.
Let me see. I can't. I don't know. I can't remember the number, but I'll get back to you on that. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt your story.
that's okay. So one quick thing about Wayne. So when I'm playing my first game for Holy Family, we go to Taunton and we lose in double overtime. And this gets to a longer story I know we don't have time for. But I ended up getting sick in the second half of that game, really sick. And I go to school the next day. Mr. Briga throws me out of practice because I'm coughing and I'm sick. So I go home and I'm in bed, and my family that night was supposed to have a Christmas party. So all my friends are showing up, all of their friends are showing up, and Wayne shows up. And
Hmm.
no one's coming to see me in my room. I'm in my room with a temperature of whatever, and I'm a mess. And my dad brought Wayne up, and he's standing at the door, and he's kind of looking at me. And he heard how I played with my first game with Holy Family, and was very, very encouraging. So Wayne plays a big part in me starting to be aware of how to take care of my body. My father shows up a few days, a few weeks after we go to New Bedford High School. He shows up with weights, so I'm lifting weights in the cellar just for some basic core strength and just strength to try to get me through playing a varsity sport, a Division I sport. And I'm still young. I'm 16 years old at that time.
Hmm.
So that's my relationship with Wayne, which goes way back, and just a really good guy, always supportive. My dad still asks about him every now and again if I'd seen him, if I'd heard from him, heard about him. And I mentioned your podcast that he was on. But so that's my history with Wayne.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I'm glad I had a year to play under him, and then later on coach for him for a few years, and great experiences. A great man, and definitely a mentor, a go-to guy. If I need him, definitely reach out to him, and I could talk to him about anything. So, but he's a great dude, and he's touched thousands of people's lives. So the Michael, we got to do this again. There's
Sure
many
thing.
things, many things we talked about. Along with you, your teammates, and kind of having a group thing. I still that's still open to you guys, and at any point, and then later on, when your book is done, guess what? We definitely want to have you on this podcast talking about your book, and any kind of book signing, and I forgot about your T-shirt this week, so I'll get that to you.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Thanks.
and I'm sorry for the delay, but
Well, it's not the fact you haven't been busy, Charlie. Come on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, but hey, I love it. It keeps me revolving, keeps me connected with the community, and I got some good friends like you that thanks to this podcast, we communicate what 2-3 times a week, and I'm glad you were on again.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it. Any support I can give you, let me know, and I'll certainly do whatever I can from my end.
All right, and can't wait to see that book. Keep typing, paragraph or two a day goes a long way. You know.
I hear you.
All right.
All right, Charlie.
you're, you're the best, man. Take care.
Take care. Take care of yourself. Thanks.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. One of my favorite guests, Mike Semiao, definitely Fairhaven's finest in my eyes. I definitely like listening to him, and when he does come up with that book, when it's all said and done, I definitely will be in line, and it will be read from cover to cover, and then put on my bookshelf. I can't wait. I can't wait. Um, who knows? It might be a good movie too. So, thank you for joining me on the Really Charlie podcast here on StreamYard, Facebook, Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. I really appreciate all your support, constant support. The next week or so, 2 weeks, I will have some great guests from the Indie Collaborative, which is a bunch of different musicians, different genres, and they're going to be coming on periodically. I have Roberta Lamb. I have Chara Shuri. It's going to be nice. Next week, it'll be Wednesday and next Saturday. So I can't wait to have them on here. The Indie Collaborative is just getting a bunch of musicians together and collaborating and playing one after another. It's really bringing a live concert, and a good network of people, and they're from all over the place, all over the country. And I met a few this past month in Kingston, Rhode Island, and they were from Texas and California and Rhode Island, New Jersey, New York. It just went on and on. Um, so to my indie collaborative group out there, keep up the good work. It's a great thing that you're doing, and you are definitely invited to the Really Charlie podcast any chance you get. So once again, thank you, Mike. I love you, brother. You keep up the good work, and keep those pages rolling in that book, and we'll talk about it later. So I'll see you guys next week, next Wednesday, with Roberta Lamb, nice vocalist, instrumentist. She's definitely a good thing. Uh, all right, take care. God bless, be blessed, and be well. Take care, y'all.